the next item, which is near and dear to my heart. For the record, I will say that I represent a county that has a lot of cities in it. The creation of new cities, townships, and other new forms of local government. Todd?
And the last one, and pardon me, Madam Chair, was de-annexation. I didn't have any recommended
Oh, I thought
changes
it was part of the...
for that. Well, yes, it is, kind of, so you're technically correct. Creation of new cities and townships. The current platform asks that a 10-year waiting period be established for the creation of new cities. This was drafted by this committee several years ago, dealing with Sandy Springs, which was the first, or what started the municipalization movement in the metro area several years ago. That train has left the station. When we're looking at a policy platform that states that, wait for 10 years, different studies be done, I don't know if it will be taken seriously up at the General Assembly because, quite frankly, new cities are created most every session and will continue to be so in those counties, and probably one coming to your area soon. So I would suggest looking, and I put in y'all's platform issues, House Bill 22, which was sponsored by Mary Margaret Oliver last year. And there are certain provisions on within that. I have them noted here. It's a 1-year wait. You introduce the legislation in the first year. It would have to sit by the committee, be considered during the next year. But I'd like to reform or look at some of the ideas that are not quite as set in stone as the 10-year waiting period and current platform, and get back to the committee with a recommendation for their consideration next committee meeting that would more mirror some of the provisions set out in House Bill 22. I believe it's thoughtful. I don't know that, if we would have any success with that, but I do think it's a lot more reasonable and it would be more respected if it were changed to that as opposed to what is currently in the platform, which I don't believe will fall. I do believe will fall on deaf ears at the General Assembly.
I'll just like to comment on that I agree that it is in need of an update in light of the current climate in order for us to have a more timely and relevant position.
And with that, I will draft a position, get it out to y'all in advance of next committee meeting, but I'd like to have something revised in there for y'all to consider. If y'all have any recommendations in drafting that, please send them to me, and I'll be happy to incorporate it. If there's different opinions, we'll just put them up. We'll let y'all vote, decide which one prevails at the next committee meeting.
Any comment? Next item, tax equity. Todd?
No recommended changes unless there's any questions or comments.
Hearing none. Excuse me.
Phil Sutton.
To clarify what counts as a tax equity issue law in the service delivery strategy law. I think that continues to be adamant dispute between cities and counties on what a tax equity issue is, how to measure it, what the services are unincorporated only versus incorporated services. And
Phil, it's something I don't have an answer to be honest with you. I think there's a lot of questions out there. If you look at the suggested policy platform, we can get at the recommendations. Right now, I don't have the answer to that, but it's a question of whether or not the policy platform makes the recommendation to try to get at that answer is what we're looking at here. Mr. Grubiak, ACCG.
Just a note on that policy position, tax equity. This is kind of talking about the reverse of what normally is the issue. Normally is cities saying that counties maybe double taxing city residents.
We do hear that a lot.
And that's what the bill is referring to. The particular issue is it's kind of the reverse of that. There are unincorporated taxpayers who are not being treated fairly relative to city residents oftentimes. If you look at the examples that are given, utility franchise fees where unincorporated ratepayers of Georgia Power, Georgia Power again, are subsidizing city operations and don't even know it. That's a tax equity
And there's been discussion on the tax equity issue on charging utilities higher rates for unincorporated residents, then cities in turn using that to subsidize their general fund. Clint Mueller, ACCG.
Back to the discussion of how this plays into your service delivery negotiations, I think there's a lot of debate, and those occur across the state, as to what revenues you derive from all taxpayers and are to be used on services that benefit the entire county versus those revenues you derive from only a sub-geographic region of your county and thereby should be sort of held in a separate account and maybe only used to pay for services in that area. There was a recent court case in regards to service delivery that came out of Gwinnett County, and some of the ruling was very concerning to us, which basically said that some of these revenues that you only derive from a portion of your county would still need to be spent countywide. And one of the arguments I know that the ACCG has made is that if it's a revenue source only coming from a limited area of your county, then you ought to be able to use that for that limited area. But that, I know we have Susan, I believe, in the room in Gwinnett County, but I think a lot of the concern really arose with that decision. And you now hear that there's consultants that are working on behalf of cities in future service delivery negotiations are now trying to point to that court case, even though I don't think it never went up to the appeals levels. It doesn't have any statewide applications other than it's just something that people point to and say, see, this is what that particular judge thought.
Any other comments?
I did want to ask a question, and you can tell me if it needs to go on a different place on the agenda. This is not per se tax equity, but it does regard tax incentives that are awarded to corporations relocating in the state of Georgia. Do you want me to table that somewhere else?
Clint, revenue and finance or economic
Yeah.
development?
Probably this one, probably economic development. It's like tax abatements and tax.
Yeah, economic development.
Right.
So this would be an issue to be discussed in our transportation and economic
I do
development.
know that Sean, who staffs that committee, they are having some discussions on that very topic, that they're meeting, is it this Thursday? This Thursday.
Okay. All right. Well, certainly something I think all the counties need to be aware of the monies that are being missed out on, because of the way the deals are structured. So,
If you would maybe talk to Sean during this meeting sometime today, and give him your feedback, make sure that stuff gets included in their discussion.
One of your favorite.
All right, next item would be the service delivery strategy, and I believe they're the key issue at this point.
A couple of recommendations. The first bullet I'd like to submit, it mentions the SDS handbook, just adding the words authored by ACCG, GMA, DCA, and the Carl Vinson Institute. That's just a minor one to reflect that we all work together in collaboration with our good government partners. Second, the judicial dispute resolution procedures. Something may need to be changed there, and as many of you are familiar, that such a procedure just got invalidated by the courts, the baseball arbitration and your loss negotiations. Need not rehash all of that, but that kept us all busy over the past year, and a similar provision is in service delivery law. And with that, I'm going to call on Mr. Jim Grubiak to give us an update or just a little bit about what may need to be changed in this position and the law, and also on what may be going on with us and the municipal association in regards to service delivery. Mr. Grubiak.
Yes, Todd. As Todd mentioned, the judicial procedures, there's a judicial arbitration procedure in the Service Delivery Act. It's not the same as it's not exactly the same as what was in the local option sales tax statute, but it has the same flaws. There's a constitutional problem with separation of powers violation in the law clause. The same thing is basically what we have in the Service Delivery statute. So it's subject to being invalidated, and more than likely would be for the same reasons it was lost. Last session there was some legislation to sort of address that, to get ahead of that by deleting the judicial arbitration proceeding in the Service Delivery Act and replace it with several changes, but basically it got down to a
Thank you, sir.
All right, we are trying to wrap this meeting up within the next 30 minutes, so I'm going to move a little quicker. And is there any more comments on this item? Okay, next item, extraterritorial condemnation and acquisition of land by cities.
Any questions or comments, suggested changes?
Next item, local authorities subject to county ordinances. Questions, comments? There's no changes to these items, so I'm going to go really quickly. Extraterritorial provisions of services by cities. Next item, elected officials' campaign and finance disclosure statements. Todd?
We did have legislation passed last year, Senate Bill 297. If you'll flip over, basically, let's see if it's the second sentence, addresses to facilitate administration at the state level, the General Assembly should encourage that all county official disclosure statements be submitted electronically. Where that can be removed from the platform, as that is now an option for counties to do so. Senate Bill 297, ACCG at work for you.
Comments? All right.
Enforce it or forget it.
Well, there's a
Well, there's
provision
that.
that we could get the enforcement, there's the last, let's see where it's in here. Provide enhanced, we're asking the General Assembly to provide for enhanced enforcement provisions. So it may not be satisfactory, but the committee and association so notes that it needs to be addressed.
Okay, next item is the federal, state, and local election runoffs.
The last part, starting with the word should, the last sentence in that policy position can be removed. We were concerned going into last legislative session, Fed primary runoff date changed, wanted to ensure that the state and locals coincided with whatever date was picked. Legislation, House Bill 310 was passed. We will not have duplicative systems. Again, that was a great, that was a success for the General Assembly ACCG, but it can be removed from the platform.
Comment?
Just that last sentence.
Hearing none. Next item, nonpartisan elections. Any comment?
Again, this just leaves it to y'all, would leave it to the discretion of you, your representatives through local legislation on whether or not, currently you can't, but it would leave y'all, allow y'all to make nonpartisan elections. I see a question from Susan, Gwinnett County. How are you today?
Hey there, Susan.
Good, thank you. Just want to make a comment. I ran this by the elections piece of the platform by our elections director, and she tells me she's on the Secretary of State's special committee that's rewriting the election code.
Yes, ma'am.
He kind of decided not to pursue that last year because of the runoff issues and the new election dates and whatnot. But she tells me that they're getting geared up to start again to finish that election code rewrite, and we might actually see some legislation in 2015 on election code rewrite.
Yeah, and just to clarify, this isn't saying that commission races will be nonpartisan. It's saying authorize it, and then allow y'all to work with your legislators to make it happen through local legislative, through local legislation. That's the position. We not include ourselves in those debates or discussions. I mean, we're dealing with counties. County commissions.
Do you know historically why the county's commission races are partisan, whereas city council are not?
I don't have that history.
Well, the policy stated is that ACCG supports the legislation that's submitted by locals to the General Assembly, whatever that legislation is.
Correct.
Yeah, we don't have a position on whether it should be.
Correct.
Take a position on partisan, non-partisan.
That is correct.
Correct.
That's correct. I knew that, just want to clarify that.
Yes, sir.
All right, moving.
I'm sorry, Liz, let me just clarify. So what ACCG is supporting is that counties can create local legislation.
First of all, you need to enact a law that would authorize any of this.
Right.
That we support, and then after that, we don't take a position on whether we want to support y'all's ability to do it, but we're not going to take a position on whether your county does it and what that, whether they go, correct. We want it authorized to empower you, along with your local legislative delegation, to make what's in the decision in the best interest of your community, ma'am.
Okay, next item, internal county relations is the category, and the next item is county officers, magistrates, and coroners' compensation. Any changes, Todd?
Please excuse me a moment, I'm not sure where this needs to come in on intergovernmental relations, but, or whether or not it needs to be in another section. But one of the issues that I know that we have is that the counties are required to do a lot of reporting to various state agencies on various and sundry, whatever. For example, submitting our budgets to DCA and Carvest Institute of Government, or doing our audits, or whatever we're required to do that. I have no issue with doing that, but it sure would be helpful we could submit it to one location and let all the others get it from that location, rather than have us having to submit it on the numerous entities.
And
Now, I don't know where that needs to go, but just something to think.
And we're very, as your legislative staff, very cognizant of that. We've been eliminating a lot of reports recently. On the budgets, I mean, we're just going to have to keep chipping away. There will be moves for greater transparency, but in the process, if we can, eliminate it or consolidate it, you only submit it once, that is something that we work on continuously.
I have no problem with our submittal, being transparent.
Sure.
To that issue at all, but just the fact that, once we submit it to whatever state agency or DCA or whatever, let the other agencies get it from there.
Yes, sir.
Well, in this age of electronics, we ought to be able to figure that out.
Thank you.
But the item that it was just called about coroner's compensation, any comments?
Just one update. The Constitution